Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh-Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News, broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya studios. These are our top stories. Fresh strikes across the Middle East as the war enters its sixth day, plus British Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer sends Typhoon jets to Qatar. Iran warns America it will come to regret sinking an Iranian warship in the Indian Ocean as a US ship is targeted. Fears for a British couple imprisoned in Iran grow as their family urge the British government to help. And sources dismiss claims that say Mossad agents planting bombs are arrested in Saudi Arabia and Qatar. On the sixth day of the war, Israel has launched missiles at Tehran and Hezbollah targets in Beirut as Iran continues to strike US interests in the Middle East. A US oil tanker has also reportedly been struck. Meanwhile, British Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer has announced the UK will send Typhoon jets to Qatar and insisted Britain's relationship with the US is operating right now. We can now go to Professor Michael Semple from Queen's University. Professor Michael Semple, great to have you on the show. Lots of developing parts to this story as we enter the sixth day of this war. But Keir Starmer says the UK is sending 4 more Typhoon jets to Qatar. How much political peril is the UK Prime Minister in following strong criticism from President Trump for not helping in the US-Israeli war on Iran?
Clearly, the Prime Minister faces threats from the left and the right. If he does nothing in this war, then of course he will be criticised from the right inside UK and from the US, the traditional ally of the UK. But if he gets too involved, he will face criticism from within his own party and the left of the country that he's repeating the mistakes of Tony Blair in following blindly into the Iraq war in 2003 against the wishes of much of the population. So he's trying to plot a fine line down the middle and taking defensive steps in favour of Gulf allies is what he's seized on, as that's what's in the British interest.
And the US and Israel are continuing to bombard Iran, killing at least 1,230 people since Saturday, as the military campaign does enter its sixth day. Where are we at this hour, as it appears that the war front is expanding?
Well, absolutely. And I mean, of course, anybody involved in combat operations on either side, I mean, they're taking massive risks. They're doing difficult jobs. But in a sense, what the Israelis and Americans are doing at the moment is the easy part. The bombing, the destruction. Mm-hmm. They have hit a baffling range of targets in Tehran and across the country. Of course, we don't quite know where it's going to go. In terms of the direct impacts of it, it seems that we have seen that they have been successful in reducing Iran's capability to launch ballistic missiles. There's been more than a 3/4 reduction in the rate of them launching ballistic missiles. We know that they've been directing a lot of force at the main security apparatus, the Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps. That, of course, is involved in the retaliatory strikes that Iran has been launching. The Americans want to degrade that capability, but also that controls the Basij militia and other units which are involved in controlling the population, maintaining control across the country. So far, that has not broken down. The issue is, will it? And is that what the Americans and the Israelis are pushing for or not?
Yeah, it's really difficult. Lots of those questions have been asked. What are the main aims right now of the US and Israel? Is it full government change that they want in Iran, or do they want that to come organically? But Michael, how does the fighting in Iran link to another theatre of war between the Afghan Taliban and Pakistan?
Well, I am absolutely glad that you ask that. It's very easy for viewers to forget that just 2 days before the US and Israel launched their strikes on Iran, another regional war started, that between the Pakistan army and the Taliban regime in Afghanistan. That started last Thursday, and it is still underway, with Pakistan launching airstrikes in Kabul and in Afghanistan's border provinces, and the Taliban launching raids with their infantry across the frontier into Pakistan's border areas. It is related, because the U.S. and Israeli casus belli for attacking Iran, as they say, it's a regime which routinely threatens the stability of key regional power, Israel, and potentially its neighbors, potentially further afield. The Pakistani case for going against its fundamentalist regime in its neighbor Afghanistan is that the Taliban have been supporting the TTP insurgents against the Pakistani state operating outside Afghanistan. So in a sense, the Pakistanis have their version of the US-Israeli complaint, but directed against the Taliban rather than against Iran. But then we look at the two neighboring fundamentalist regimes, we see that despite long differences between Iran and the Taliban, since the Taliban came back to power, the Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps has invested in building its relationships with the Taliban. So these are two allied governments now under attack from different powers.
And Michael, I just want to see if you wouldn't mind reacting to some breaking news lines that we're getting out at the moment. This is a report from Axios, and it's saying Trump says he needs to be personally involved in selecting Iran's next leader. Trump has confirmed that Mujtaba Khamenei, we know that's the son of Ali Khamenei, is most likely successor, but outcome is unacceptable. I don't know what your reaction to that news is.
It really is a long way from Washington, D.C. to Tehran and Iran. In terms of the politics of the United States, the experience of this White House, particularly what they managed to pull off in Venezuela, it might seem absolutely logical that the President of the United States should have a say in who becomes the leader of Iran. But in terms of the spirit of the Islamic Republic in Iran, and indeed much broader nationalist sentiment inside Muslim countries like Iran, it's common to other ones, they couldn't possibly brook the idea of a foreign leader, even the head of the greatest power in the world, trying to dictate who will be their leader. So yes, it might make sense in the US, but it's hard to see any part of the Iranian politics actually accepting such an idea.
Professor Michael Semple, thank you so much to reacting to that breaking news and for joining me today.
Most welcome.
Al Arabiya English has learned from its sources that claims alleging that Saudi Arabia and Qatar had arrested Mossad agents planting bombs in Gulf countries are baseless and untrue. The claims began circulating widely after US journalist and broadcaster Tucker Carlson said the two Gulf neighbors had arrested Israeli Mossad agents planning bombings in these countries. This prompted the Qatari Foreign Ministry to strongly deny it. More details now with Catalina Marchand de Aubray.
Have you seen a clip claiming Mossad agents were arrested in Qatar and Saudi Arabia for planning bombings? It's been shared a lot online, but here's the real story. Tucker Carlson posted a video saying authorities in Qatar and Saudi Arabia arrested Israeli intelligence agents planning attacks. But the official response from Qatar's foreign ministry contradicts that. They've said they have no information about Mossad cells or arrests related to such a plot. In fact, Qatar has recently been a source of misinformation in the context of the Iran war. Qatar rejected a report by the Jerusalem Post claiming the Gulf state launched attacks inside Iran. Spokesperson Majed Al-Ansari stated on X, Qatar has not been part of the campaign targeting Iran, and emphasized that Doha is exercising our right to self-defense and deterring Iranian attacks. He also called on media organizations to rely on official Qatari sources when reporting on the country's position. What has been reported via official channels, Qatari authorities say they recently arrested 10 people linked to 2 cells allegedly working for Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, accused of espionage and sabotage targeting sensitive and military infrastructure. So, the bottom line, no confirmed Mossad arrests in Qatar or Saudi Arabia, no credible sources backing Carlson's claims, and Qatar says it has no involvement in attacks on Iran and urges media to check official sources. And here's a crucial point. Spreading false news in Qatar is a serious crime. You can face up to 5 years in prison and fines up to $27,500 US, with penalties doubled if committed during wartime. So before sharing sensational claims, remember, in Qatar, fake news isn't just misleading, it's criminal.
Now, Iran has warned the US it will come to regret sinking an Iranian warship in the Indian Ocean. The Iris Dina, carrying 130 sailors, sunk after a torpedo hit it, killing at least 87 people. As tensions between the US and Iran escalate, South Asia is being pulled into the fallout. Darshan Dalal has this report.
Images released by the Pentagon showing a combat ship being blown out of the water, lifted above the sea after being struck by a torpedo fired from a US submarine. On the left side of the video, crew members can be seen scrambling for safety as the vessel erupts in a massive explosion. US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says the Iranian ship believed it was safe in international waters, but was destroyed by a torpedo fired from an American submarine.
Yesterday, in the Indian Ocean, and we'll play it on the screen there, an American submarine sunk an Iranian warship that thought it was safe in international waters. Instead, it was sunk by a torpedo. Quiet death. The first sinking of an enemy ship by a torpedo since World War II.
Authorities in Sri Lanka say at least 87 bodies have been recovered, while 32 people were rescued from the sea. The vessel, the Iranian frigate Iris Dena, had been visiting India and was taking part in the multinational naval exercise Milan 2026. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has condemned the attack, calling it an atrocity at the sea, and warning the United States will bitterly regret what he described as a dangerous precedent. But the strike has also raised serious diplomatic questions. Both India and Sri Lanka are now facing scrutiny over whether they had prior warning before the US attack, particularly since the Iranian vessel was participating in an exercise hosted by the Indian Navy and operating close to Sri Lanka's maritime zone. Officials in Colombo say the Iranian ship that was hit was outside their territorial waters, but still inside the island nation's exclusive economic zone. Meanwhile, Sri Lanka says another Iranian vessel is now heading toward its coast following the submarine attack. Authorities say they are trying to ensure the safety of those on board.
This ship is still not in our national waters. It is located in the exclusive economic zone close to the national water belt. I can only tell you that we are making the maximum intervention in relation to those lives.
The incident underscores how the US-Iran confrontation is expanding far beyond the Middle East, now pulling South Asia into the geopolitical fallout. Darshan Dalal, Al Arabiya English.
For more on this, I'm joined by journalist Loveena Tandon. Loveena, it's great to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining me. Why is the US attack on an Iranian warship in the Indian Ocean considered historically significant since World War II? And does this widen the war even further?
So to answer your first question, Leigh-Ann, yes, it is historic because it is the first time in 81 years since World War II that American has torpedoed a submarine, especially one that is coming from India, from Milan, as your report said, after diplomatic mission, and it was not in a combat mode. So it was not with arsenal, loaded with arsenal. In fact, and another indication is that instead of 150 people, it was carrying 180 people on it, and they would not have gadgets of figuring out where the torpedo is coming from. Also, it's the second time in history that a nuclear-powered combat has happened since 1982. So to saying this, that they would not have the capability to find out where this torpedo is coming from. And also it is quite stealth, it is very quiet. So that's the historic moment, really. Also, I must say that while this is being treated like a conflict, so it is ideally a conflict, and it is not yet, at least not yet declared a war, but it is a very warlike behavior because it has happened for the first time since World War II that something like this has happened. So clearly, this is the first thing. The second thing is that by doing it where they did, it's in the Indian Ocean, they have taken the war from Gulf to the Indian Ocean. So definitely engaging with South Asia and in the Indian Ocean. So of course, India, Sri Lanka. So everyone has had to react to this. Secondly, it was an air strike. The war was treated as the conflict was being treated as an airstrike, but now it has gone to the Navy and the Marine. That is another shift that has happened in this whole conflict. And to the extent that, of course, the US defense has already said that they are going to destroy, and they have 20 submarines already. They're going to destroy the naval capability of Iran. So this is definitely an escalation. It is definitely moving the war from air to waters. It is moving the war from Gulf, or expanding, I would say, not moving, but expanding, escalating, and definitely moving the war to another level.
And Loveena, what's been the reaction to the sinking of Iran's warship? Because India's Navy had welcomed Dina's arrival and is now involved in a rescue effort.
Yes, there's a very important technical difference that I must, demarcation, if I may say, that yes, it was Indian Ocean, and yes, it was a diplomatic mission from Visakhapatnam in India, where actually the US was participant as well. So the US was participating in the diplomatic mission from where Iranian ship was coming from. But it was an Indian Ocean, but not in Indian jurisdiction. It was in international waters. Same goes for Sri Lanka as well, that it was an international matter. Of course, strategically, it is very, very important. And so the reaction is also very politically loaded. One would say that recently India and the US had this defense treaty, and they've had defense arrangements, and the US has come and done that in the strategic area of India. India is supposed to be, or at least poses itself to be, the guardian of that Indian Ocean. So yes, it is from that point of view very significant. At the same time, one has to say it is not in India's jurisdiction, and it was in the Sri Lankan area. The distress calls that were made by the Iranian ship were made to the Sri Lankan. It did not go to India. So immediate work was happening from Sri Lanka. Of course, now India has sent their rescue mission as well. But these are three technical the demarcations that we must bear in mind when we think of this. What has been the reaction? Just to quickly answer that, it is definitely one which is very uncomfortable. It's a very uncomfortable knock on the doors of India that has tried its very best to be quiet, to remain quiet and to remain neutral, but they would have to react. Now they have had to react. They've gone after 5 days to write in the books of expressing for Khomeini, the death of Khomeini, and they have had to make statements. So yes, they are coming. They're having to hopefully not take a stand, but definitely be more reactive than they have been till now. So it is a very uncomfortable and the closest knock that they have had, or the closest worm that they have had with the Iran conflict.
Yes, indeed. Loveena Tandon, thank you so much for joining me. China has cut its growth target to between 4.5% and 5% at its annual parliamentary sessions as the country grapples with challenges at home and abroad. It's the lowest expansion goal set since 1991 and signals a more cautious outlook from Beijing as it tries to stabilise the economy while managing structural pressures. Jan David has this report.
Delegates from across China gather at Beijing's Great Hall of the People for the opening of the country's biggest political event of the year. Thousands of lawmakers attending the National People's Congress will spend the next week reviewing policy plans and economic priorities. At the centre of those discussions is the government's new growth target. Premier Li Qiang announced the goal in his annual work report.
Fellow deputies, on behalf of the State Council, I now report to you on the work of the government for your deliberation and also for comments from members of the National Committee of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference.
The new 4.5 to 5% range reflects mounting pressure on the economy. Domestic spending has remained weak, the property sector continues to struggle, and global trade tensions are weighing on exports.
The lower growth target suggests that the leaders here are acknowledging the challenges facing the economy. Growth remains a priority, but this new set of targets also indicates that they say they might have to accept a lower rate of expansion as they deal with underlying structural issues.
China is trying to rebalance its economy. Officials say the focus will be on boosting household consumption while investing in high-tech industries, advanced manufacturing and green energy. Delegates at the meeting say they are also looking for policies that support local development.
Following the plenary session of the Communist Party, arrangements were made for rural road construction and development. I'm very much looking forward to progress in this area during the session.
Infrastructure and rural development are among more than 100 major projects planned over the next 5 years. Lawmakers are also examining the outline of China's 15th five-year plan, which will shape economic policy through the end of the decade. Jan David, Arabiya English.
As the Iran war enters its sixth day and the US and Israel continue to strike Tehran, the family of a British couple who are in an Iranian prison are urging the UK government to help get them released. There are serious fears for Lindsay and Craig Foreman's safety as they're serving a 10-year sentence after being charged of espionage, claims they have always denied. For more on this, I'm joined by their son, Joe Bennett. Joe, thank you so much for your time with me this evening. Joe, extremely difficult time, I do completely understand. And as I was just saying there, the war has entered its sixth day. Reports suggest bombing of Tehran is now intensifying. Your mom, Lindsay Foreman, along with her husband, Craig, are currently being held in Evin prison in Tehran. Can you just describe the emotional impact this is having on you and of course, your family?
Yeah, deeply worrying times. You know, the anxiety goes through the roof when war breaks out. I mean, you know, we've always said the whole way along that war shouldn't be the answer, but we are where we are. And yeah, extremely worrying. I mean, these bombs are relentless. They are going off at an alarming rate. And, you know, parents are hearing the fighter jets go over. There's bombs that are close enough to the prison that they're blowing out the windows and the ceiling, is falling in. So to say they're at danger, it is for sure where we're at the moment. And luckily, we've been able to have communication from them as early as today. And that brings around a hell of a lot of relief, but just a daily reminder of the struggles that they're facing.
And you have said there that you've managed to have communication with them today, which is, as you say, a massive relief. And what have they been telling you from the situation inside Evin prison?
Yeah, I mean, when this all kicked off over the weekend, tensions were high. There was mass panic, hysteria, people, quite literally trying to find shelter in a shelterless place. As the days have gone on and, the strikes are still hitting, but not as close to Evin prison as, a couple of them did over the weekend, there's this sense of anticipation. One of the conversations that we're having at the moment is, what's the means to the end? How does this conflict bring round the right resolution and a permanent change for the good? I think that's one thing that's felt from the Iranians within the prison, is that this is, for the first time in, almost 5 decades, the sight of genuine change on the horizon. But it also, there's a slightly different approach in that, not all of the inmates are friendly and kind towards my mum. They've lived under a regime where the Ayatollah has said down with the US and down with the UK. So there is animosity amongst all of the other layers that they're facing, which again does bring huge concern for us as a family.
Yes, of course. And I don't know, because, Joe, it's very difficult to have communication with people inside of Tehran. I've managed to have some with a friend here who has family members in Iran, and they do say that it's extremely difficult to get hold of food and supplies as the war does continue. Do you know if your mum's managing to have access to nutrition, to water, to the basics?
As it stands, yes. I think they've got a stockpile for a couple of weeks in terms of their rice that's delivered for dinner. The shop is where they can supplement that with fruit, veg, and that's where the worry is how are they going to be replenishing stocks when they run out? It's a question that we're asking continuously of our UK government to try and find a solution to, because that is a genuine concern. It is, as you say, within this tragic time that the country's facing, that these realities exist, that, the bare necessities that people need to survive within prison as political prisoners and the other innocent protesters aren't going to have access to. It's very, very tough to see how this plays out. And as I say, we have to work and keep pushing to try and find a solution to the short term with having the long-term goal of peace and, as I say, movement at the other end.
And what steps do you feel the British government could take to secure the safe release more effectively? And do you think they've been doing enough for you and your family?
It's a difficult question. I mean, unfortunately, I don't have the answers in terms of what they should do. I mean, I've always said along the lines, if the relationship isn't, working or the communication is broken, then we should explore options like third-party mediators. I know that Oman and Qatar have done some really good work when communications between the two governments have not been possible. We're at the moment seeing an intervention from President Trump, and you'd have to hope, and I've pushed on this as well, that as allies, that the protection of their citizens is one that they've agreed on and are unified to an extent that they can when war is upon us. So, there's various avenues I think that they could and should be taking. They don't ever disclose that to us, which again is where the frustration is born from. But unfortunately, and this is not a slandering match, but unfortunately over the last 14 months, I've not seen any sign of progression or movement from my government. And, I feel let down and they feel let down at the moment.
Yeah, it's a really...
I'll give you one example, just very quickly. The British Embassy, when they removed their staff from Tehran, which I do understand, they did not notify my parents directly. We had to be the one to deliver that news. And they also didn't provide any kind of contingency plan for my parents in the event, you know, of what we're facing at the moment. And I just feel that that is, you know, it's poor government leadership, to be honest.
Joe Bennett, thank you so much for speaking to me, and I hope that we can reconnect again. And I also hope that there's some relief for your mum at the end of this. Joe, once again, thank you so much. I'm now joined by journalist and author of a book about Iranian militia in Iraq, Baria Alamuddin. Thank you so much for joining me. I don't know if you just heard the interview I did previously with Joe Bennett. It's really difficult because his parents are in an Iranian prison at the moment, Evin prison. From your perspective, what are the most urgent humanitarian consequences of the ongoing US-Israeli strikes on Iran?
Yes, thank you so much for having me. My name is Baria. You can say probably Da'a in Arabic. Tremendous consequences on every level. You were just talking to the gentleman whose parents have been imprisoned for a while. They were going around the world, and then suddenly they found themselves victim of such policies that the Iranian regime has frequently subjected foreigners to, as calling them spies. This is just one of them. There are people dying in my country, Lebanon, as we speak. I just came back from Dubai. I was with my family, and we managed to get to Oman. And I saw that tremendous amount of worry that people have, especially about the young ones, the tremendous consequences in the economic situation in the world at large, but also in the area, but also in Iran. Don't forget, in Iran there are people, in Israel there are people, in Lebanon there are people. So wars never produce good consequences of any kind. And I don't think that we know exactly what the aims of this war is. As you know, I was also, before Dubai, I was in Saudi Arabia, and I saw the vibrant economy. I saw how people were happy. I was in Bahrain. People are going about all these countries, and Doha, where these are booming countries. These are countries that are helping the world, everywhere, helping the Arab world in particular, people in Gaza, and now they are in dire straits. People are scared. The oil has stopped. We haven't seen anything yet. We're still at the very beginning. So I think the consequences are dire. The consequences are huge. And everybody will be better off with this war ending, and hopefully with regime change in Iran, where the Ayatollahs can only stay in their mosques, and they would get democratic, normal people to run the country.
And it's really difficult to see what the end is, as you did say, right now, as we enter the 6th day of this conflict. How do you assess the impact of Israeli military operations on civilians in southern Beirut and other areas of Lebanon? Because this is another theatre of war that we have been seeing.
I have actually witnessed the 1982 invasion of Israel, of my country, and that's why we immigrated and stayed in the UK. Luckily, we were allowed to stay. And we are part of the society. And I'll do anything for the UK, for their kindness and for accepting my family. However, my heart goes to the people of Lebanon. As you know, Hezbollah, who is an agent of Iran, has been requested by the Iranian regime to enter this war. This is not a war that the Lebanese people chose. It's only a very small segment of the Lebanese people that are called Hezbollah. Even their supporters do not support this war. These are people that are sleeping on the corridors of the streets. They are sleeping on the corniche. In Beirut, you can see them from balconies. These are people that have nowhere to go. And today, as we are speaking, Israel has ordered the people of Adahi, that has hundreds of thousands of people, to leave. They asked the people of Bint Jbeil, of Sur. These are big towns in the south of Lebanon. These are beautiful areas where you have beaches. And I really hope that Mr. Kushner and President Trump do not think of building something over there. But frankly and truly, the consequences are dire. People are not only dying, but they are mentally impaired. They're facing catastrophe after catastrophe. They're losing their homes, their livelihood. They're losing their children. These are people that are even losing their dignity, their will to live, because frankly, the government cannot. It's a government that is trying to get out of many years of Hezbollah domination. It's nearly a failed state, Lebanon, and to have this war, the consequences have not been clear yet, and it will take some time for this consequences. But the death already is around 700. Wounded are more than 2,000. And we're just on the, as you said, the 6th day. So I'm very, very worried and concerned about the people of Lebanon, like I'm concerned about the whole area, the whole world, indeed.
Mm-hmm. And in light of your reports that strikes during the war have hit civilian targets, so we're hearing this in Iran, including a girls' school in Iran where many children were killed. What do you see as the humanitarian consequences for women and children in Iran? And how should the international community respond to protect them? Because women and children are traditionally the most vulnerable in a war zone.
You know, one of the main victims of what we're seeing around the world is the loss of world order. The UN is rendered ineffective. There is nowhere to go for the people. You hardly hear about human rights. You hardly hear the word democracy from the administration in the US. These don't seem to be taken into consideration. Europe is trying to get themselves together, haven't succeeded so far. I don't know where you turn to. I don't know where the world order is going to. This is why I think people are desperate. And I can tell you as well, it's not only the people that are dying and they are wounded, but also the other people. Everybody is tense. Everybody cannot enjoy themselves. I'm in London. I just came back from a wonderful lunch with friends. And everybody is just worried. We're unable to sleep. We are unable to enjoy the peace in England. This has to change. The world cannot go on with such lack of disorder. The UN has to come back into existence. It has to come back to respect. Human rights should be talked about. They should be considered. Unfortunately, what we have seen the last 2-3 years in the war about Gaza and what we are seeing now, witnessing in the West Bank and all around the Middle East, does not give us hope. But I'm a very hopeful person, and I always believe in humanity and the law and order and justice. So I'm not sure who's going to bring us this, but hopefully it will come. This cannot go on for a long time, because also don't forget the loss of oil. The world economy is in shambles. Let's hope the Americans will be able to control both the Iranians and the Israelis that are frankly raining havoc in the area. We need peace. As I told you, I just came back from the wonderful Gulf countries where you see prosperity, beauty, development. I really hope this could be recovered and stayed, and not only that, preserved and continue to move on. Destruction doesn't serve anyone. Wars don't serve problems. At the end of the day, after this war, people will have to sit around the table, discuss, and hopefully reach a resolution.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And I think many people would echo what you're saying, that diplomacy always has to come into play at the end of the day, even after a major conflict. But I just wanted to ask your thoughts, actually. We got some breaking news a little bit earlier on, and Trump says he needs to be personally involved in selecting Iran's next leader. What do you make of US involvement in that process?
Honestly, it's so difficult to make. I mean, can you imagine the head of state of supposedly the biggest democracy, the free world, to come and say that I'm going to actually appoint the head of a state of 90 million people? I'm sorry, this is not acceptable. I hope and I pray that every country in the world, independent country, will be able to choose their own leaders. And I'm not sure that Mr. Trump is the person capable of choosing anybody for his own country, let alone for other countries. This is adding insult to injury. I am no supporter of the Iranian regime, as you probably have gathered, but I think it's up to the Iranian people, and I hope that this destruction will only bring hope and democracy and order to the Iranian people. Don't forget, the ones that are suffering from this regime are really the Iranian people. And I'd like to add one idea here. When Hezbollah was being created, when the PMU, Hashd al-Shabi, which is my book about in Iraq, were created, the Americans were there, the Israelis were there, they were witnessing, and they were keeping a blind eye, because it suited them to have Lebanon as a failed state and Iraq as a failed state. It suited them that Iran could threaten a beautiful country like Bahrain, or now the Gulf. The Gulf did not want this war, that I'm sure about, because they were enjoying everything that they could. They were enjoying good economies, they were enjoying development, educated population. I mean, this is beyond belief that the head of the United States would say, I'm going to choose who governs 90 million people in Iran. This is not acceptable.
Thank you so much for speaking to me, given your experience covering Middle Eastern geopolitics. And of course, you had a career in TV, you've written a book. It's just been fascinating to hear from you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's all from us on W News. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on X. Goodbye and thank you for watching.